Hello, my name is James, and I used to do this a lot more consistently, or at least I used to try. So bear with me. The last time I uploaded a video on this channel, it was for a February wrap-up, talking about new releases or just general collection updates of the month. And next thing I know, I've blinked and it's been almost just over 3 months. So that's for a few reasons. Part of it is I try to slow down spending a little bit. You know, the economy is as it is. And then turns out, as I was logging the things that I did get into Discogs, I realized that maybe I didn't do as good of a job as I thought. Anyway, so 3 months of doing monthly wrap-ups is going to be a bit excessive. So I chose some highlights from the last 3 months to kind of highlight either new releases that came out and I listened to and I enjoyed and bought, or things that actually reflect what my listening habits were in those 3 months. It's not that I stopped paying attention to new music and new heavy metal specifically, but life got busy. It kind of took a little back burner, especially through late April and most of May. I started going to a lot more concerts this year, which is great. I always enjoyed doing that. Went down to Anaheim for an industry-related thing, not work-related, but industry events. And then I just last weekend came back from a road trip up to Seattle. So life has been busy, and a good busy, but also incredibly stressful. So let's get started. First, before anything, I do want to shout out Millennium Fantasy on Instagram, who reached out to me, I believe in March. I don't actually remember when this was, but he asked if he could send me Myths and Legends by TEARS of Magdalena. This is, he said he was going to send me the promo, and then I think he ended up just sending me the actual final release jewel case, which I really appreciate. He's such a nice guy. So yeah, this is, for those of you who don't know, you can just tell by the look of it, it is a very indulgent, twinkly, Finnish band, whatever, it's gothic symphonic metal, right? This album was released in 2008 on Scarlet Records out of Italy. The band is Finnish, but it's you know, it's very of the time in some regards, and some regards is also way like behind their time. It's very faux operatics, very twinkly, doesn't really have that, well, it doesn't adhere so much to a traditional pop song structure, which had at this time completely taken over the gothic and symphonic genres thanks to the popularity of bands like Evanescence and Within Temptation and Nightwish and all that. So like, it's definitely, it lives in that world, especially being a Finnish band. It lives in that Twilight shadow, mid-2000s gothic symphonic crossover space. However, the structure of these songs and of this band's playing feels a bit more 2004 and before, like, you know, around that time. So like, in some regards they were kind of behind their times, but it is still catchy, you know, dated, but it's like a nice go-to meat and potatoes symphonic gothic metal album for those of you who like that sort of thing. Like me, I like that sort of thing. Anyways, so again, thank you, Millennium Fantasy. Very nice guy. I enjoyed this greatly, and it is beautiful. I have a thing for purple, and I love purple album covers. Anyways, moving on. I want to get into what actually derailed my listening habits, and it is 2 albums, and neither of them are metal, and they are Creation by the Pierces and The Great Impersonator by Halsey. I don't know. I was just in a mood. This album I've loved for the better part of a decade at this point. It came out in 2014. I love this band specifically. It is a sister team. They got famous from the song Secret that was used, I believe, as the television theme for Pretty Little Liars, I think, back in like 2008 maybe is when that show came out. Not entirely sure, but that's kind of when they started getting like really mainstream-ish attention. The follow-up to that album, that song is on 13 Tales of Love and Revenge, is You and I, or You and Me, You and I used to have a copy of it on CD, no longer. It was stolen, and I haven't yet replaced it, and I want to, and I will, because it is one of my favorite albums of all time. And then this album, Creation, came out in 2014. It kind of steps away from the folkier aspects of their earlier stuff. So, like, by the time You and Me or You and I came out, they had already started leaning into pop rock and alternative, radio-friendly alternative music, right? Is the direction that they kind of went to. Though they still had some of those folk aspects to their sound. This album mostly drops a lot of their folkier aspects. It's very kind of fun pop rock, synthy, but alternative in tone. And it's been an album that has grown on me very slowly over the last 11 years since it came out, to the point where I finally now am like obsessed with it, and I had to have a copy of it on CD. Let's talk about purple covers again. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I can't justify this. It was hitting a specific emotional thing, right? I love this album and I love this band, and unfortunately they don't do anything. Well, they don't do much together anymore, these two sisters. I think they've gone on to do different endeavors, but I think nothing can replace the chemistry that they had together. Anyways, and then the other one, Halsey. This album has sent me on a Halsey kick the last couple months also. I enjoy her pop stuff, and you know, the poppy R&B, sometimes trap pop. I enjoy some of that stuff, but I really dig Halsey's alternative stuff. So the album that came out before this, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, was produced by 9 Inch Nails, and that album is so killer. And I didn't go back to listen to that one until this one, and I've been obsessed with the two of them. So, but you know, this is the one that I bought. This is the one that came out last year. It's about parenthood and disease, aging. It's very multifaceted, and it is, I don't know, it's very Halsey. And you know, the photo rollout, the marketing campaign that Halsey did on their Instagram was interesting and cool idea, and you know, it definitely caught people's attention. But I think you know, the whole impersonating different artists, ultimately I think people expected it to sound more like those artists, and I am glad it doesn't. I think Halsey is at their best doing Halsey, and all those little inspirations do come across, like they do come in, but I'd rather it sound like Halsey paying homage to certain sounds from the past couple decades than just trying to do like a send-up album, or you know, or do something a little bit more explicit. So what we got is very heavy, it's very heartbreaking, and it definitely hit me in a way this year that I did not expect, and I quite enjoy it. Anyways, moving on, I want to talk about new stuff, new releases. First, I have some major, the big names. Let's start with the big names. Those will be easier to talk about. First of all, right, Ravage of Empires, Benediction. This is my first Benediction album that I've probably listened through all the way. I'm not the hugest death metal person. I probably have said that many times on this channel before, but this was good, and it definitely, my biggest issue, my ish with death metal is I often find that there's no place for me to like hang my hat. So what I liked about this album is that yes, it is brutal, yes it is heavy, yes it is like really riff centric, but they also just have like some nice killer like hooks, and they're catchy songs. And that's my big issue with a lot of death metal, is that I there's no hook. So this was good. Nothing crazy amazing. It probably won't, you know, place on my top whatever number albums of the year, but I did quite enjoy it. So I went ahead and bought it. That being said though, it is kind of hard to me to active listen to. I think it's best if you're listening to it while doing some other task. You know, some albums are just like that, and probably just because of the genre, this is going to be one of those for me. Next up is not a metal band, but adjacent, depending on what kind of subgenres of heavy metal you listen to the most, and that is going to be Pathways, the new Birthday Massacre album. This is a band that I didn't love for like the first decade that I've known about them, maybe decade and a half. And then all of a sudden I saw them opening for Lacuna Coil in 2023 and I was hooked. So I quickly like acquired all of their records. And this one, you know what? I'm just gonna say it. I liked this album. I actually really liked this a lot. When those singles were dropping, I didn't love them, but I think now, having heard the whole album from, you know, front to back, I dig it. They're good. And in fact, this is kind of a step up from the last couple albums. This, for those of you who don't know, the Birthday Massacre are a Canadian alt-rock, synth pop, dream pop, industrial, sometimes new metal-y, like clusterfuck genre band, right? They're quite interesting. It's very, it's electronic and dark and heavy at times, but also kind of cutesy. It definitely does that mid-2000s Hot Topic. It's not the aesthetic. It's definitely, but it does the same thing that Hot Topic did back in the mid-2000s, where it was trying to blend that like really accessible cutesy aesthetic with the dark, edgier aesthetic that was like, you know, of the day, the emo alt stuff, right? This band is kind of like an embodiment of that concept, where you're mixing like the dark and the light and the adorable and the subverted, like alternative kind of things, right? Why I like this album so much, it's kind of short. It's only 8 tracks long, 33-ish minutes, but why I like it, okay, so back up. This album is much more of a rock album. The last few, I think this band for the last decade, off the last 5 albums, was getting progressively less interesting, less good. Some of those albums in the last decade they're just very mixed, you know. Sometimes it's not a killer album. This one, it's short, and I would like it to have been longer, but it comes in with energy. It's still, you know, still is the Birthday Massacre. They're not doing anything wildly different. I had a coworker, I'd play them in the lab at work, and I had one coworker that complained that all their stuff sounded the same, which, like, I mean, I guess if you're not into it, but you know, it's across their whole career, there's definitely like production, songwriting things that they do differently here and there. So this album brings a lot of energy, brings a lot of crunch, and that is something that I think their last couple albums have desperately needed. This is a lot less dreamy, a lot less synthy, and they definitely try to, you know, write hooks, write nice choruses, really well developed melodies, and those are things that I think the last 5 albums have kind of been lacking. Anyways, so this is a great step up from the last couple albums that came out. Really enjoyed this. I'll be spinning this more. I still haven't really figured out a lot of like my rating system for all the new stuff, because again, I've been kind of out of listening to the new stuff lately, but this was a good one. Next up is the new Epica album, Aspiral. I don't know how to say it. I should have looked that up. But this came out in April and was probably one of my more anticipated releases of the year, much like the Lacuna Coil album, and this one has also kind of let me down a little bit. It's just, it feels like a rehash of the last album, and I wasn't crazy about the last album, but this feels like that album and less good, less engaging, less developed. So yeah, it's still not a bad album. It just doesn't hook me. I think it's missing some creativity, some identity. It feels like a lot of the more the modern kind of copy paste symphonic metal bands that have been coming out of like Italy and Germany lately. It does not stand out against the sea of bands that this band has inspired. So not probably going to come back to this that frequently. Not bad. Like, the individual parts are fine, but I just think the songwriting is just a little weak this time. So here's the next one though, right? Can't take that too long. Okay, other big name. Swedish melodic death metal mainstays. Arch Enemy with their new album Blood Dynasty. And this is actually, I'm a fan of Arch Enemy. I've kind of fallen off of the last couple albums just because, I wasn't paying attention to new music very well, or wasn't doing a good job at listening to new music. But I made a point, I probably pre-ordered it, honestly, just fuck it, I'll buy it and then I'll listen to it when I get it. And it is cool. Not stellar, but not bad by any means. It is definitely different. It feels punky and thrashy, and at times, like, fantastically power metal. It is an interesting combination of everything. It still sounds like... Does it actually sound like classic Swedish death metal? No, not really. Or Swedish melodic death metal? Not really. I think if this was released under a different band's name, I think it would get a bit more attention, I think. Because I think having the Arch Enemy name loads a lot of expectations to it, and this one completely subverts expectations. There's a lot more clean singing, a lot more power metal wailing. It just is a different direction that this band is trying, and maybe they'll continue with it. Actually, would not mind it. I think the Arch Enemy that we had all kind of come to know over the last couple decades was getting stale and definitely needed a switch up. So Blood Dynasty supplied that. Is it amazing still? Not really, but it is a solid record. I actually had a ticket to go see them this year in San Francisco. Unfortunately, I was sick for like a week and a half in May or April. That was April. I was sick for 2 weeks, so I missed this one. Curse my luck. But actually, the plan was I was gonna just stop by, get in, buy a T-shirt, because the last time I saw Arch Enemy, I was an idiot and I waited to the end of the show to get merch. And at that point, I was not willing to, wait in line. And that was like a birthday thing. Like, I went to go see Arch Enemy on my birthday with a friend, and I just didn't get merch. So I was like, this time for sure. And then, no, I got ill. Okay, next one. Cradle. Other mainstays. UK-based symphonic black gothic metal mainstays. Cradle of Filth. You either love them or you hate them, apparently. I love them. In general, I have a fondness for Cradle of Filth. Not everything they do is a winner. This one, I think, absolutely is. This is probably my favorite of the modern incarnation of Cradle of Filth, starting with 2015's Hammer of the Witches. That was kind of like the Renaissance album for Cradle. And I have liked all of the new albums. However, they don't stick with me the same way this one does. This album was killer. Don't expect it to be much of a black metal album. It really isn't. It kind of played off more to me like an extreme gothic symphonic metal album. There are some thrashy bits, there are some black metal bits, there's some melodic death metal bits, but it is at its core a symphonic gothic romantic album that just leans a bit more heavy than a lot of the bands in that genre. Something, think maybe a Gatho Daemon during the Phoenix album cycle, or Trail of Tears is another one like this, where they definitely have, depending on the album, they will have those black metal and melodic death metal sounds kind of front and center, but it's not the thing that really defines their music. It feels like that. It's beautiful. I saw them live, this one, for the Chaos and Carnage show. There was the Cradle of Filth and Winds of Plague fronted, headlined touring festival, I think is what it is. Nea Obliviscaris was there, loved them. Flesh God Apocalypse was there, saw them for the first time, and they were really cool. I'm not even a huge fan, but I still walked out with like 2 t-shirts and an album. But yeah, no, but this album fucking fucks. Like, this is so good. Does that make me a poser if I say that I really like Cradle of Filth? Anyway, I'm gonna move on to smaller names. Things I really wanted to highlight from the beginning of the year is this one band from, I believe they're from Belarus? Romania? Don't remember. They're called Belle Morte. They are a gothic symphonic metal band, and they're kind of like a retro throwback, like the same way that TEARS of Magdalena is kind of behind for their time. These guys also feel like a bit more of a throwback, but let me get into this. So this is actually their debut from what does the actual album say? I want to say this is 2020, 2021. Anyways, unconfirmed. I'm gonna say 2020, 2021, around there. And this is a bit simpler, and it definitely is darker than their new album. This leans heavily into those gothic kind of textures and stereotypes, I guess, right? The markers of gothic metal from, again, kind of mid-2000s. And it is pretty good at doing that. However, I think Pearl Hunting, their follow-up that came out in January of this year, is like leaps and bounds ahead. It definitely pulls away. Like, okay, no. It is in structure and in spirit Gothic symphonic metal. However, it definitely has to make room for different sounds and different influences, because what they've done with this album is that they've invited so many musicians from across the world who played various like world instruments, like folk instruments, and just have them be guests on their songs and just kind of let them like run wild and like just kind of like fucking shred on like an ocarina or whatever, you know? So like each of these members or guest session members have their photos featured, and they have little bios about the artist and what they do and what instruments they play. And so this approach to making music definitely gives a more progressive, atmospheric, and like worldly edge to this band's sound. And I think it paid off amazing. I think they're gonna have a hard time topping this one. It just is such a varied kind of textural experience, and hearing all these different influences from around the world kind of come into this, what is essentially kind of like a twee like symphonic metal band from Eastern Europe. I don't know, it was just a really cool album, and it's really strong, and it's actually currently one of the contenders for my album of the year, or at least on the list, right? Moving on, I don't remember what this band is from. I want to say they might be German or Swedish. Ooh, I don't remember, but this is Arion, I don't know, with their second or third album, The Light That Burns the Sky, or this could have potentially be a debut. I have forgotten, but I listened to this on a whim, and this is very modern symphonic power metal. You know how like the Avantasia album that came out, the Avantasia album that came out this year, like There Be Dragons Here or something, felt like an 80s, 90s throwback. This feels definitely of this time, and I think what they've done here with the sound is great, because it's power metal, but it's not overly stereotypically European, you know, power metal. It definitely sounds modern. And then the flourishes from the symphonic elements that they have lends nice texture. It's definitely like an epic edition that doesn't get, it doesn't over, like just kind of like puke on everything, and it doesn't feel aimless. A lot of the problems I have with modern symphonic metal is just the way that the orchestration feels very aimless. This does not. This feels, everything is precise and pinpointed, and there's a return to themes, like musical themes. Also, the vocal performance on this album is great. I love the guy's voice. Do they maybe overproduce the vocals a little bit? Not saying like pitch correction, but it definitely has this like crisp kind of quality that happens when you kind of produce someone's vocal lines a lot. I think a lot of the metalcore bands these days that do a lot of clean singing have the same kind of vocal effect to it. Anyways, but killer record though. Really enjoyed this. Just high fun. Okay, let's go. I think we're down to the last stack. Again, this is just highlights. This isn't even supposed to be all of it. Okay, I have 3 things. Okay, these are all French bands from France. I'm sorry. If you know, you know. The meme. 3 French bands, all released albums in the months of March, April, I think. Don't really remember. Don't quote me. We have Dynasty with their new album Ascension, and Achiavel with their album Invictus. These two are wildly different approaches to the same genre. These are melodic death metal bands. Dynasty, it's been around since the 90s. Apparently they started off as a black metal project. I have not listened to any of their older stuff, so I can neither confirm nor deny. And what they've done here feels a bit more akin to the Swedish sound, especially like Dark Tranquillity, I think is like the closest comparison I can think of. It feels like a send-up of that sound, but of course it feels fresh and modern and grandiose as all hell. And it's just, it's a great record. Honestly, it might beat out the Halo Effect for my top melodic death metal album of the year. It just is so well constructed. It is hyper melodic and the hooks are killer. Everything about it is well constructed. The keys and the string additions are wonderful and they don't feel out of place. That's something that I've noticed about a lot of melodic death metal, is when there's those extra flourishes of like keyboards or strings, they often feel kind of weirdly placed because the genre is already so melodic. However, they make it work. It's really, really strong, really great. I don't know. I want to gush about it, but I probably shouldn't, because otherwise I feel like I'll get really repetitive. But let's talk about Invictus. Different. This is, it's an expressive, almost theatrical kind of approach. It's a lot more angry, and part of that is the vocal performance and the lyric writing. It's definitely talking about different things. This band has a lot of violence in their lyrics. There's a lot more anger. It feels a lot more visceral. So the music definitely reflects that. It is a bit drier, and it just kind of rips. And at some points, that whole melodic bit of melodic death metal, they'll fully take it out, and there'll be straight passages of just like straight death metal, or things that I feel maybe they're inspired by like a really much driery, groovier style of metal, right? But definitely just it is just more fierce. It's at you in a way that the Dynasty album is not. That being said, I think if you're more into like just brutal metal for the sake of being brutal, this might appeal to you more. It can be a little tiring, but it's still good. It's good construction. Like, it is a good record. I have no problem getting through it. However, I think the storytelling on it can become a little bit repetitive, and because of that, the album can feel a little repetitive or a little one note. So like whenever this band does take a step back and they let the atmosphere kind of take over, it's like a nice breath of fresh air. Yeah, strong album. Do I like it as much as the Dynasty? No. Is it more interesting than the Dynasty? More interesting than the Dynasty album? Potentially, yes. And last but not least, Aerokiss. I don't know how really to pronounce this. This is their debut album, The Sunken Lands, and this is just high fantasy, epic folk metal with tons of like melodic black and death and power metal influences. It just feels big and epic and is really damn strong. Again, French band. This is, I believe, independently released. I'm so happy that I took a swing on this. If anything, let me see if I can. It feels like the Sayor album that came out. It feels like it's playing in those same waters. However, it definitely lends itself more. It pulls more from like power metal and symphonic metal aesthetics and qualities, right? It's less atmospheric. It's a lot more blazing, not intense necessarily, but it's definitely higher energy. And I thought it was really, really good. Okay, so this is my highlight reel of my collection of the stuff that I've purchased in the last 3 months-ish. I couldn't talk about all of it, and I intentionally left out the June stuff. And yes, there is June stuff, but it's only, we're only on like the 12th, 13th. I don't even know what the date is, but Expect to see more from me soon, and a June wrap-up hopefully, and maybe at that point I will maybe consider doing a best of 2025 so far. Maybe try to keep that a little short. Of course, you know, that those positions might change as the year progresses. There's some good releases coming up on my calendar, so I can't wait to look out for those. Again, thank you, Millennium Fantasy, for sending me the TEARS of Magdalena album, and this has been a long enough video, and I will go now. Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, what have you.